Hannah, welcome to the Strong Female Athlete Podcast.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here today.
I always love having mental performance coaches on because it plays such a big part in our training and our sport performance. So, we are going to talk about all things mental training today. For those of you who haven't heard of Hannah before, she is an amazing expert in this space. She works with individual athletes professionally, she works with organizations, she does speaking engagements, and she also works with corporations as well. So, people who are high level and just work regular jobs, but they're also athletes too. So I think this podcast is going to be such an important message that yes, we need mental training for sport performance, but our female athletes also need this for life when they're retired. So I can't wait for this discussion. And we're going to talk a lot about how to be in the present moment. So, Hannah, my first question is how can athletes focus back on the present moment on the micro level when they make a mistake in a game situation?
Yeah, great question. I also love that we're just jumping right in. I feel like so many podcasts, it's like all this like long stuff and like we're straight to business here. So I love that. Yeah, so when it comes to present moment and how that impacts your performance, one, I think it's actually one of the like if you want to call it a secret to success, I think getting in the present moment helps anybody and everybody in anything that you're doing, right? If you think about it, if you're fully engaged in the moment, you're going to be better at whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like even if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're also driving or cleaning the house or doing whatever, it's like you might miss part of this podcast, right? And then you have to go back and listen to it because you kind of got lost, right? Just because you have so many things going on. And so the same thing happens in performance, right? If we're doing something specific, but we're thinking about what we're about to do 2 steps from now or what we already did, right? We're not going to be as focused on the task at hand, which automatically puts us at a disadvantage. Like if you think about it, right? Especially if your opponent is in the present moment and you're not. So I think anytime you think about coming back to the present moment, it's because you want the mental advantage, right? And so how do we do that? There's a lot of different ways, but to keep it simple, right? Let's talk maybe 2 or 3 ways of how to do this. So the first thing I would recommend is if you're one of those people who has like a heightened sense of one of the 5 senses, like I would tap into that. So maybe you have a really good sense of smell. Like, so in the heat of the moment, like, what am I smelling, right? Is it fresh cut grass? Is it, I don't know, a whiff of fresh air, right? Like tapping into that. If you like hear things really well, what are you hearing right now? Can you hear the crowd cheering for you? Can you hear that one teammate who always is cheering for you? Can you hear your coach, whatever it is? What do you see? What do you feel, right? If it's the grip of your bat, if it's the grip of anything, if it's the grip of the ball, whatever sense you feel like, heighten that sense and like become really aware of whatever that sense is. And that's a really easy, like kind of quick way to tap into that present moment. So you're thinking about what's in your hand or what you're looking at or what you hear or what you smell instead of anything else, right? So that kind of automatically pulls you into the present moment. And then I think lo and behold, the trusted thing from a bigger level is to bring you back is your deep breath, right? And I think sometimes we go through the motions on this a lot because everybody's heard take a deep breath, it'll bring you back, it'll slow your heart rate down, it'll do all those things, which is so true. But if there's no intention behind the deep breath, then you'll kind of get lost in the sauce, right? It's like, okay, that did nothing, right? But if you slow down, if you actually do a diaphragmatic breath, if you feel your lungs expand or your stomach expand and then deflate, like all of those things, and actually make it like an actual thing instead of just like, right? Then it actually has the impact of pulling you into that present moment. So those are my 2 favorite things that are just like quick hitters on if I start to notice I'm getting in my own way or thinking too far in advance or overthinking or overanalyzing what I already did, like pick one of your senses that's your favorite sense and really lock in on that. And then or take a deep breath that's actually intentional and not just going through the motions, just like anything else, right? If you go through the motions, it's not going to have that much of an impact. It's the same thing. Technically, you took a deep breath, but it's not going to have the impact you want if you go through the motions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are really great for our audience. And the deep breath one is super powerful, especially for a girl who maybe made a bad pass in the heat of the moment and she just takes a deep breath and then quickly gets back into that play. But maybe for an athlete who is the type that kind of beats themselves up after
Yeah.
mistakes, how can they kind of navigate that moment when it happens a little bit better?
Yeah, so I think one, you have to realize mistakes are pretty normal, right? And you have to understand that if you're pushing yourself to be the best you can, you're going to make mistakes, right? That's not just playing it safe and taking it easy, right? You're going to make mistakes in high level situations, and especially if you're playing any and all sports, right? That failure is a part of all sports. So how to handle a mistake or a failure or how to reset is super important. So one of my favorite ways to think about this is actually the eat it acronym, which I'm pretty sure I made this up. I hadn't heard it before, but it's just making it tangible. So the first thing you do after you make a mistake is you allow yourself to have an emotion, right? Like we are human beings. Like maybe it's not an outrageous emotion where you throw something or yell or, something that's not appropriate for your team or the setting you're in, but you have your emotion. Like it's okay. We're humans. We want to be successful. So we're not happy when we aren't, right? And so we're allowed to be like, oh, like I'm just mad. I need a second, right? And so have your emotion and then take a second to figure out the A is adjust. Do I need to adjust? What do I need to adjust? So you're kind of reliving it a little bit. What did I do everything I could have done? Did I do everything in my control? Or is there something I could adjust and make better? Sometimes you can make an adjustment, sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes you did do everything right and the outcome just wasn't what you wanted it. So I always say, do you need to make an adjustment instead of make an adjustment? And I think that's a really small difference, but I think that's really important. So, do you need to make an adjustment? And if you do, what is it? And it's just minor, right? You're in the heat of the battle. You're not really gonna completely change everything, like your approach or technique or something, but maybe a little thing here and there. And then the T is throw it away, right? And the throw it away is where I think you can say, okay, I've had my emotion. I've allowed myself to have this emotion. I've figured out if I need to make an adjustment. Now I can let it go. And that's where you kind of pair it with a deep breath. And so you've been able to process it. And it's a whole lot easier to process and then get back into the present moment instead of like kind of hold on to that weight for too long. So that's my favorite. And the cool part about the eat it method is it can be 5 minutes long, right? That process can take 5 minutes, but the elite of the elite, especially in, the baseball or softball world, can do that in about 15 seconds, right? You can have your emotion, figure out what you need to adjust and throw it away, take a deep breath, get back into the moment in 15 seconds, which again is an elite level skill. So I would say start on the broad spectrum, like however long it needs to and takes to do that. And then the more you can dwindle down, the better, right? Because the more time you're in the present moment, the better you're going to be instead of being kind of stuck in what happened and not being able to get over it fast enough. But again, a part of that all is realizing like going into it, you got to know that mistakes are going to happen and you have to have this plan locked and loaded and not just react when you do fail and hope you've got a plan to handle it. And I think sometimes we don't want to talk about failure because we don't want it to happen, but the reality of it is again, it's going to happen, so why not have a plan for how you're going to handle it, and how you're going to get over it as quick as possible? Because it's kind of I used to say it's about failing quickly, right? Like once you fail, how do you get through it quick? Because your opponent's going to fail too. But if you're lingering in it and stuck in it, and they're buzzing through it, right, you're at a disadvantage. So how do we fail quickly?
I really like that eat it method. I'm going to use that myself, and I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of people listening are definitely going to as well. And I like what you said about really asking if an adjustment is needed because oftentimes when I'm having conversations with parents of young girls, these girls might have a bad game once in a while and after that bad game they constantly want to fix and do more training or add this in the training program and it's like whoa, like can we just allow that it was just an unlucky game and we
Totally.
don't always need to fix.
Totally. No, and I think we get so entranced in the outcome part of that, and that's why we want to change it. If our outcome isn't what we wanted, then we need to mix something up. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been working with an athlete where they do this, and then they change it, and then a month goes by, and they're like, "I'm just going to go back to my old ways," and it's like, "What? like we didn't need to change anything, right? From you've worked especially if you've worked really, really hard on your process and your plan and you know what you need to give yourself the best chance to succeed. And then you go out there and maybe something doesn't go right. Like you can't just throw it all away and start over. And so I think it's such a game of tiny, tiny, tiny adjustments. And sometimes, again, like sometimes the only adjustment is you tip your hat and come back and do it again, right? And depending on the sport, like sometimes you do everything right and the only thing that's wrong is the outcome. And then you do the exact same thing and then the outcome is a success the next time, right? So it's definitely something that I think we overlook a lot because we want to fix, we want to change, we want to be better. When maybe the reality of it is stay calm, don't freak out, try it again, and now if we're doing the same thing over and over and over again and not getting the results, then we have a bigger thing we need to figure out. But I'm talking like minor things throughout the game. So yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to the next question. So, if an athlete is having consistent games where they are in this rut and it's
Mhm.
mistake after mistake after mistake, and they just are off every single game for a few months, then how can we manage that situation? A lot of girls like to call it playing ruts.
Yeah.
So, like, how to kind of crawl out of that.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that nobody wants, right? We all go through playing ruts, we all go through slumps, whatever it is. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is remember that everything in life is like ebbing and flowing, right? So in the grand scheme of a season, and you have long seasons, shorter seasons, whatever, the chances of you playing well during that season are high, and the chances of you going through a stint where you don't play well is high, right? Like very rarely do people have seasons where they're just unbelievable the entirety of the season, right? And so again, it's how we approach the season, like knowing that the good times aren't going to last forever, which is not the best news, but also the bad times aren't going to last forever, which is a little bit better news, right? So I think when you're thinking about this, you got to weather the storm a little bit, and it's understanding again, kind of that lack of or that sense of awareness on understanding. Okay, I'm not the best that I could possibly be right now, but am I still doing everything inside of my control to give myself the best chance to succeed, right? We can never guarantee success in most sports, right? In most things, whether it's individual, team, whatever. It's really, really hard to be like, oh no, 100% I'm going to go out there and succeed today. We don't really know that, but you can 100% be confident in how you're approaching things, right? And like, can I control what I'm focused on today? Yes. Can I control how I'm talking to myself today? Yes. Can I control my effort, my energy, my attitude, my leadership, my communication, right? When when we feel like there's so much outside of our control, there actually is so much inside of our control. And I think when you are really going through it, like the number one thing I can come back to is, are you doing everything in your power to control the things you can control? And I know that's like a buzzword in the sports and performance psychology world, is control the controllables. But I think in a moment where things are just not going your way, that's when it's the most important is, okay, if everything's going horribly, right? Or it feels like everything's going horribly, I'm going to write out a list of all the things I can actually control, right? In my sport, in my game. And hopefully I get, I don't know, 10 to 15 to 20. And every single day I'm going to check in, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I do this? Right? It shifts your focus from, instead of only feeling like you have to get results, to actually these are the things that matter and these are the only things I can control. So am I doing these? And then I would argue that if you're doing everything you have control over, it's going to lead to better results eventually, right? But hopefully the goal is you do this and you don't go insane, where maybe focusing on the things you can't control, even though it ebbs and flows, right? You're going to eventually pick back up and get into a good rhythm, but you might go crazy doing it because you feel like you just have no control over anything you're doing and you're just like, ah, who knows what's going to happen today. Right. But if you are a control freak, if you are an overanalyzer, if you overthink things, come back to overthinking and overanalyzing the right stuff, which is the things that you can control. So, I mean, eh, part one, understanding we're all going to go through slumps and ruts, and that's going to happen. But part two is like, are you controlling the things you can control when that happens, or are you making it worse? Right? Are you staying in that rut or that slump longer than you have to because you're focusing on the wrong things, because you're just wearing the negativity out? You're digging your hole even deeper instead of little by little trying to climb out of it, which the way you climb out of it is controlling the things you actually have control over, right? Yeah, but it's not fun. Nobody wants to be in that, but that's what I would do if you were experiencing that.
That's a really realistic take on it because I think you said something so important there that success is not guaranteed. And look,
No.
I'm all for the whole hard work pays off and work hard and it will like lead to great things, but sometimes your hard work doesn't pay off.
Yes.
And
The
I think we should
$1,000,000
talk
point.
about that
Yeah.
because like that doesn't mean don't work hard because there's no guarantee, but I think in that process of working hard, you learn what you're made of. And it's not
Yeah.
always about did I get the result or not, as
Yeah.
crappy as it feels if you don't get it.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and I remember from my personal story, and testimony, I was in college, and I mean, I was one of the hardest workers on our team, like, without a doubt, like, that was one of my MOs. Was I the best player on our team? No. But I knew and, like, I was raised, right, work hard, it'll pay off, and I was like, I physically can't work any harder, right? Like, I was tapping out on all my skill sets, right? Mental, physical, all the stuff, and I physically couldn't work any harder, and it didn't necessarily pay off, and that was a really, really hard pill for me to swallow, and I kind of like big picture now, I would argue hard work doesn't necessarily always pay off in sports, but hard work always pays off in life.
Yeah.
Like, always pays off in life, right? Because, like, the work that I do now, right, the work you put in your pocket, like, things are going to, like, come back full circle in the real world, but sports, sometimes it's just not like that, and that's why we all love sports, right? It's not just, "Oh, if you go out there and work hard, you're gonna be the best," right? If you go out there and do all these things perfect, you're gonna be the best. It doesn't work like that, and that's why I think we're so infatuated with sports is because it's not easy and there is no cookie cutter approach to doing it, right? If it was just hard work that made us all great, we'd all be really, really, really great, right? We'd all be world champions and Olympians and all that stuff, but sometimes it's not that, and but you said it, I don't think that's not an excuse to not work hard. That's just an excuse and an awareness level of understanding what you're getting into when you're playing at a high level sport, right? Or competing at a high level, or even working at a high level, right? It's one thing to work hard, but it's another thing to understand like what the grand scheme of everything is. And that was a really hard pill to swallow, but I think it's important to know, like, right, if you know you're working your absolute tail off, then are there other things you could possibly be doing that would help your game, right? Maybe it's from a mental standpoint. Maybe it's actually working hard at rest. I don't know, you know. But yeah, that was a hard pill for me to swallow, but I did, in fact, learn it, and it was not a fun journey to learn, but yeah,
Yeah. It's funny. My dad always said never confuse effort with results.
yeah,
Yeah.
mm,
Effort can make you luckier, but it's like you said, it's never guaranteed. But that
yeah,
doesn't mean you don't work hard the next time or push towards your dreams. And when we were talking off air, we were talking about how this is going to eventually translate into a female athlete's career when she eventually retires from sport. You're
yeah,
not going to get opportunities right away. You're not going to get speaking engagements or go to all the conferences or get that job or get that promotion, but that doesn't mean you give up. It means you keep learning about yourself along the way and having faith in a better tomorrow and keep plowing forward.
yeah.
It really is that process, I think.
Yeah, and even in that situation, it's like, okay, I have no clue what I'm gonna do. I didn't get this job. I don't know if I'm qualified for this. Like, okay, well, what can I control in this situation, right? Like, what can I control? What can I put all of my focus into and just be really like devoted in that. And that's where I think we get lost is we spend our time and energy and focus on the things we can't control, like, oh, I'm never gonna get that, or why didn't I get that, or what happened, instead of like, okay, well, what can I do to get better? Like, how
Mm,
can I adjust this? What can I do? What can I carry over from this to that? Who can I call? There's so many excuses, but most of the excuses are things that are outside of our control, right? And the things that are inside of our control, it's like nobody can do it but you, right? And if you can look yourself in the mirror after a long day and say, "Oh, I didn't do these things," then that's on you, right? And so I think you still work hard, right? It's not about guaranteeing success; it's about giving yourself the best chance for success, right? So you're still doing everything in your power to succeed. And then when all the stars align, a little bit of luck sprinkled in there, that's when you find your success. But it's a recipe that has a lot of things you can control and a lot of things you can't control. So you better make sure your half of the recipe is locked and loaded, because you never know when the other things are going to happen, right? They might not happen here, but then they're going to happen there, and you better be ready for it, right? Like my dad used to say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And I love that, right? Like you never know what's going to happen around you, but you better be ready for it, right? You better be ready for it, because God forbid something does happen, a door does open and you weren't ready. And that's what I think the biggest piece of mental performance comes back to is, are you doing everything in your power to be successful? Are you controlling everything you can? And I mean, even when you think you are, there's probably still things that you could be doing that's better, that could be impacting you bigger than you know. So great point.
I like with the playing ruts too. You talk about controllables in the sense of just becoming a better character and human. Because I think during playing ruts, a lot of parents of female athletes will be like, well, our controllables are we can do more skills training or we could work with a strength coach. But they don't think about the mental side of it and being a good
Yeah.
teammate and maybe working on leadership skills or just being more supportive of a teammate. I mean, there's so many things that they can work on that aren't physical skills
Yeah.
during that playing rut that just make a better, well-rounded human.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of times people hear work harder and they go straight to the physical side of things, and you can work too hard.
Mhm.
You can literally work too hard, right? The person who's going in like, I need to take 500 swings post game. I'm like, what? Do you, or do you need to rest? Right? It's like you can work too hard. So be careful knowing what your max capacity is, and that varies for everybody. And like right, some weeks you gotta work really hard, and some weeks you need to take off, and you need to be in tune with your body, understand how it's working under pressure, under success, all those things. But um, to me, it's very rarely, at least with elite level athletes, is it a lack of effort, right? Like a lack of like, those do exist. Like you're like, hey, what are you doing? But most people who are at a higher like competitive level don't make it, who lack a ton of effort, right? So it's like those people kind of get weeded out pretty early. So everybody is like wants to work harder and get the physical reps in, which isn't a bad thing, but you have to know there is a point in your training, physical and mental, where it goes from helpful to hurtful, right? So we're doing these reps, we're getting these reps, we feel really good. Now I'm getting tired. Now my reps are getting lazy. Now I'm not really focused. Now all of a sudden it's like, what are we even doing, right? That's where it's going through the motions. That's where burnout occurs and all those things. And so you have to be really in tuned with intentional reps, and intentional practice is what it's called, right? If you're locked in, you feel good, your legs feel fresh, you're hydrated, you're well rested, right? And you want to push yourself, great, right? But if you get in there and you're dragging tail, right? And you don't know what's going on, and you're just out here because you don't know what else to do, that's probably hurting you more than it's helping you. And so that's a question I always ask and have athletes and performers come back to is what you're doing or thinking, is what you're thinking helping or hurting you? Is it helping you or hurting you? Because a lot of times on paper, it looks good, right? A positive thing is going to get extra reps. Well, are those extra reps intentional or not? If they're not intentional, it's probably actually not a positive thing, right? It's probably hurting you. If they are intentional, then maybe it is, right? And so instead of a positive or negative situation or a positive or negative thought, come back to, is it helping me or hurting me? And like, that's a very real question, and sometimes you'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's helping me. I'm getting more reps." But if you actually think about it, is it? And so slowing down and asking yourself those questions, which comes back to self-awareness, right? And understanding who you are, and like having the wherewithal to be like, "Hey, is this helping me? Like I'm not sure this is helping me anymore. Maybe it helped me last season, but I've changed and I've evolved and I need actually something different. Maybe the best thing for me to do right now is rest. Maybe the best thing for me to do is get mental reps. Maybe the best thing for me to do is go have a conversation with my coach or a teammate or assistant coach, whatever it is. Maybe those things would help me more than just out here repping it out, you know? So just come back to, is what I'm doing helping me or is it hurting me? And that pretty much lays it out for you on what you need to do.
Yeah, I think we really need to redefine what hard work means because it could also mean sitting on the couch and drinking a protein shake and
To-
recovering your muscles. And
Totally.
that's better for you than having an extra training session. And I
Love
like
that.
your point that most parents of the athletes listening, it's usually not a lack of effort, especially the level of people that are listening. And their
Um,
girls are training a lot. They're practicing
mhm,
3 to 4 times a week. They do skills
mhm.
training, they do speed and strength. But I always try to tell people those recovery rest days are where you get your physical gains and then your mental gains, your mental reset. And that can be considered hard work, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, if you reset correctly, like which whatever that is for you, if that's actual sleeping, if that's going to bed earlier one night, getting off your phone a little bit more, maybe getting some mental reps in, maybe having a good conversation with a teammate, like that is and can be incredibly impactful. So it's like, what are you doing on your rest days too, right? Are you just lounging around on the couch all day, like binge watching Netflix and like frying your brain? Maybe not the best, right? Are you going outside? Are you getting vitamin D? Are you resetting? Are you grounding? Are you earthing? Are you meditating? Are you just slowing down and checking in on your body, right? There's actual productive things you can do on a reset day instead of just like chalk it up as a lazy day, right? And so like if and maybe that's where the disconnect is, right? If you're just sitting on your couch watching Netflix all day, then that's probably not quote unquote hard work, right? But if you are able to say, I'm going to go to bed at this time and I'm going to wake up at this time because I know I need a full 8 hours. And then when I wake up, I'm going to eat a really healthy meal and like reset. I'm going to make sure my protein intake is correct today, right? I'm going to put on my blue blocker lenses at night, right? Whatever it is. If it's a actual great reset day, that can be incredibly impactful. But again, the disconnect too on like what does that actual reset day look like? And not to tell people like you need to have a full regimented rest day, right? I don't want that to be misinterpreted, but I think there are things you could do to make a rest day more impactful than just like laying on the couch all day, you know?
Mhm. Let's quickly talk about self-awareness. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if this can be quick, but it's a whole topic. But you mentioning Netflix there or these girls maybe scrolling on TikTok on their rest day. I
Yeah.
mean, I just think that stimulation can really take them away from themselves and
Yeah.
it ruins that self-awareness. So maybe we can talk about why self-awareness is important and
Yeah.
just how to cultivate it better.
Yeah. I mean, besides present moment, when I'm working with an athlete, self-awareness is the number one thing that I work on with because I think my quote for this is you can't grow if you don't know, right? If you don't genuinely know who you are, it's going to be really hard to make any adjustments or to grow from there. And so on one hand, right, self-awareness is the foundation to everything else, right? If you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, what are you going to do, right? How are you going to make your strengths better or your weaknesses better? Maintain strengths, get your weaknesses better. You don't know if you don't know, right? If you don't know that you're stressed, then it's going to be really hard to get help for that. If you don't know, right? And so it all comes back to self awareness. And then you talk about how do we actually build this, okay? And I have three main ways that I help people build self awareness, at least in the beginning. And these are a little bit broader, but you can take them and run with them in whatever ways that work for you. And just because we give you three doesn't mean do all three of them tonight, right? It's like pick one and run with it. So the first one is journaling. And I don't care how old you are. I don't care what sport you play, what performance you do. If you're not journaling and you have a lack of self-awareness, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, right? Start, even if it's something as simple, and this is performance journaling, right? It's not clinical therapy journaling, right? It's tell me one thing you did well and one thing you need to get better at. That's it. Every day. Every day. If you think about that, you're building awareness on the things you're doing well, which is actually building confidence too. But you're also like, there's always going to be areas of growth. And so you're creating the awareness around what are the areas of growth instead of waiting for a coach to tell you where you need to get better at, right? Or a parent to tell you where you need to get better at. Why don't you hold yourself accountable, right? In both a, hey, you did this really, really well today, a little pat on your back, and also, hey, we need to work on this. Okay. Every single time you have a performance practice game, whatever it is, film session, write something out, right? You're going to get your brain thinking about what you need to work on instead of just like showing up for practice and seeing what happens, right? Understand what your strengths are, understand what your weaknesses are. Like that is a no-brainer to me. The other piece of journaling I would say is if you're working on something specific, like say your coach or leader says you need to be a better leader, or you need to communicate more, or you need to work on this specific skill more, make that your target for the month, and then rate yourself every day for 30 days on how well did I do at that skill, right? On a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, I gave myself a 7 today, and then one sentence on why you gave yourself that number, right? So you're keeping yourself accountable and you're getting better at that skill instead of just coach tells you you need to be a better communicator and comes up to you a couple weeks later, "Hey, how's the communicating going?" "Oh, good." Like it's like, "What? How do we know?" Right? What is it? I don't know. So be like, well, here, I started here. I kind of trended down here, picked myself back up here. Here's where I think I'm at now. How do you think I can get better? Right? It just creates a better dialogue and so much more better self-awareness instead of just the generalities of good or bad. Like that's when I'm working with people, good and bad is not a good enough answer for me. Like that, we're not getting anywhere, we're not moving the needle, and you're not getting better because of it. So let's actually pay attention to that. So the first thing I would say is journaling. The second thing I would say is I would just encourage you to ask better questions. If you really lack self-awareness, go ask somebody, hey, what's my weakest area when I'm performing? What's a blind spot that I have that maybe I don't see? What's my greatest strength? How do you think I impact this team the most? Where do you think I could grow with my impact on this team as a leader? Like the better questions you ask, the better answers you're going to get, and the more you'll start to understand more about you. And like, don't just ask these questions to anybody, right? Go to somebody you trust, whether it's a trusted teammate, a friend, a parent, or a coach that you really have a good relationship with, right? Don't just take this advice from social media, right? That's the problem with social media. You get on and they're like, you need to do this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, I need to do that. And it's like, does that even relate to you, right? At all? Like make sure, and it's kind of the same with books too. Like some people are like, oh, I read this book, I want to do all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this book tells you 12 different mental performance skills. Do we need to implement all of them? Right? A lot of times it's like you need ABC, you need DFG, right? It's like understanding yourself instead of just overwhelming yourself with too much information. And it's a good problem to have, and I appreciate it because people want to get better, but at the same time, like, is it actual impactful information? But if you're not asking the right questions and if you don't understand yourself, you don't really know. And so you're just like wanting information overload. So, second thing to build self awareness is asking better questions. And then the last one, which I think is huge for this generation and goes back to the original question on TikTok and scrolling mindlessly, is spend time alone. Spend time alone, quiet, no TV, no phone, no interruptions, no distractions. I come back to all the time, like, why do we have our best thoughts when we're in the shower? And it's because you can't have your phone in the shower, right? It's like a moment where it's like you feel the hot water or the cold water hitting you, right? You're fully in tune with that. And all of a sudden, I'm actually paying attention to my thoughts and my mind. And it maybe you've been having that thought for weeks now, but you just finally started to pay attention. So now you're aware that you had that thought, right? If we constantly have phones or whatever in front of our face, you are not ever going to have a moment alone with your thoughts. And two reasons why that's dangerous. One, you're not going to know where you want to go and what you want to do. And like, you're never going to form a thought for yourself, right? Like, you're just going to follow the crowd everywhere. You're going to just like kind of meander through life because you're not forming your own thoughts. And then the second part is you're not going to know how to handle your own emotions, which is really scary, right? And that's where you get into games and you fail and you can't run into the dugout or the clubhouse or the locker room and grab your phone and get on TikTok in the middle of the game, right? To like blind your thoughts or blind your emotions. And so you have to be one with your thoughts and emotions so that when they aren't good, which is hard, and we don't really want to face them because it's not comfortable, but when they aren't good, you know how to respond, right? You know how to control them. You know how to turn it from helpful to hurtful or hurtful to helpful, right? You understand yourself better. But if you don't give yourself those moments of quiet time, it can be 5 minutes a day. Set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes and just stare out the window, right? I don't want you to picture being at a beach. I don't want you to picture being somewhere. I want you to be wherever you are, right? With zero distractions. And whether it's driving and no radio, working out, no headphones, first 10 minutes of the day, just chilling, no phone, last 10 minutes of the day, chilling, no phone, whatever it is, find however it fits into your schedule. And I would challenge you at minimum 5 to 10 minutes a day. You should be like quiet, no distractions, and just like see where your mind goes. Pay attention. Don't direct it. Just see where it goes. And it's kind of cool to see the benefit when people really buy into that, and how slowing down, listening to their own thoughts, handling their own emotions, how much more in tune we get. And you wonder why there's a massive lack of self-awareness in the world we live in. It's because we're constantly distracted by everything. I read the other day, an article about kids, right? You've got cell phones, tablets, video games, computers, TVs, and they never form a thought for themselves. And I'm like, that is crazy, right? And you're doing yourself such a disservice. Like, these kids don't have a way to grasp anything and process anything because they just go straight to their phone, and not to mention the attention spans that it's affecting too. But
Mhm.
yeah, so self-awareness, so journaling, asking better questions, and finding quiet time. And again, don't pick all three of those and start doing them tonight. Pick one. If you're listening to this, pick one and decide to do it for 30 days and see how much it impacts your life and your performance on the field.
Thank you for that. I think the social media discussion is just such an important one to have. And it really terrifies me, and I don't think it's going to end well for a lot of us,
Yeah.
and a lot of kids, and I know people are like, "Oh, well, you guys are millennials, and you guys think you have it better," and it's like, "No, I think this technology thing is not
Yeah.
great for stimulating our younger generations, and even us adults struggle with it, which is even scarier because our brains are already developed, so
Yeah.
imagine what a young girl is going through and not having those thoughts for herself, and that can ruin a lot of her productivity and also her intrinsic motivation to
Yeah.
get better and take action in her life. I mean, there's just so many repercussions to constantly being on social media that much, and that's where parents do need to get involved in this and set those boundaries with social, however you want to do it,
Yeah.
whether it's starting small and then slowly building it up over time. But I
Yeah.
mean, the damage is already done, I
Yeah.
think. But, there's some people listening with younger girls that maybe can stop before it starts.
Yeah, and just keep having the conversation, right? Like, be realistic. Like, and again, it can just be like dinner at home with no phones. Like, it can be little things. It doesn't have to be this big adjustment where you're like, no phones ever, right? And if we are on the phone, is it helpful? Is it advantageous? Is it like, like, I'm not saying don't ever get on TikTok, but if you do, get on it for like 15, 20 minutes. Like, let your mind dump, do it. But like, next thing you know, we're on it for 2 or 3 hours, and it's like, holy cow. You talk about things that are hurtful, right? Like, what in the world, what good is coming from that, And if you're like, well, it gets me out of my headspace, like, I get to be, then we need to work on other things that will help get you out of your headspace, right? Like, going on a walk outside when it's a beautiful day, right? Like, going on a car ride with your favorite song. I don't know, but like, that can't be our only source of like happiness, or like getting out of the real world. Like, that's where I think it becomes really dangerous, is when that's our escape, our crutch, and we just lean on it so much that's like, okay, again, going back to, are you even processing your own thoughts, and what are other ways you could do that? That would be a question for me if I was like addicted to myself. I'm like, what are other ways I can cope and check out, and relax, that isn't mindlessly scrolling? Like, why wouldn't you ask yourself that and have an answer for that? And that way, when you pick this up and you're like, oh shoot, I'm mindlessly scrolling, now I can go do something else that I know, instead of like, well, what else am I going to do? Right? Like, don't wait till that moment occurs, to figure it out, understand what you're going to do before that. And that way it's just an easier transition, instead of like, it is what it is. No, especially, but again, only if you want to be a high performer. If you don't want to be a high performer, don't worry about it. Scroll away,
Right.
it's totally fine.
Right. It's in your hands, guys.
Yeah, literally.
Oh man, I love the honesty, Hannah. And I think we can end with my fun surprise question for
Okay.
every guest I ask on this podcast. So, we are called the Strong Female Athlete Podcast. And I'm curious, how would you personally define a strong female athlete?
I think a strong female athlete is someone who knows who they are, and regardless of the situation, of the outcomes of anything around them, is confident in who they are and knowing what they need to do to be successful. So it's just, you know who you are, and you're confident in who you are, which I think are two different things. But if you know who you are and then you choose to be confident in who you are, it's a pretty freaking strong female athlete, if you ask me.
I love that answer. Now, I want everyone to follow up with Hannah. I
Yeah.
left all of her information, her amazing work, and her website and social in the caption below. So be sure to check her out. Maybe you want to work with her in the future. It's all in the caption below. So hopefully you follow up and connect. And I will see everyone on the next episode.